Hello everyone, and welcome back. Tonight, as you can figure by now, we're going to be talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street. So, let us get started, shall we? And as usual, I will be double-checking some of the facts and some behind-the-scenes stuff on the Wikipedia, while also giving you my own personal opinions on the movies, since I have actually seen the entire franchise before. Anyways, starting off with A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, the first true, actually the second truly New Line Cinema only movie that was created by the group. But it was also the biggest boon to the company, and would also help the film company continue to produce more films well into the 90s and into the early 2000s. The original Nightmare on Elm Street was released on November 9th, 1984. It had a budget of $1,800 and managed to produce in the United States $25 million. So out of 1 million, they managed to they managed to multiply it by 25 pretty much, and came out with a huge amount of money back for what they put into it. Some quickfire facts, if you will. The scene where the blood shoots out of Glenn's room, the boyfriend of Nancy, was actually filmed in upside down, and at the time it was the most fake blood ever used in one scene. When his mother opens the door, at the end of that scene, you can actually see the blood turning horizontal and diagonal, which was caused by them tipping the room back over. The room was also the same one redressed used for Tina's death towards the beginning quarter of the film. Tina being the character that we originally are to assume was supposed to be the main character until she is killed, and the leadership then goes to Nancy. The confusing ending of the film is due to Robert Shaye wanting to have a scary ending. Meanwhile, Wes Craven wanted a more happy-go-lucky ending, where Nancy wakes up after defeating Freddy, and she realizes that the entire movie was just a dream. Shaye wanted the ending scene to actually be a nightmare. The ending of the movie actually was a composite of the two different endings, both of which were actually filmed for the movie itself. My personal opinions, very strong movie. It was probably one of the more outside of maybe Phantasm, was probably one of the better horror movies to really encapsulate and get that feeling of a dreamlike state, where you aren't totally sure whether or not you're actually watching the real thing or not, which is a huge boon to this, because not everyone has been able to do it. As a matter of fact, the movie almost didn't exist because someone else did a dream-based semi-horror film the year previous, and then after it bombed, no one else wanted to touch Elm Street despite Wes being on it. So onwards to Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, released November 1st of the next year, 1985, again the year I was born, so I'm a few months older than Elm Street 2. And yet I'm almost the same age as Friday 5. Interesting. The budget for this one was upped quite a bit to $3 million on the mark, and managed to gain back in the United States alone $29 million, so it's still doing quite well for itself, and is actually one of the few horror movies to actually go up instead of down on the sequel. Some quick facts about Nightmare 2. With 9 total victims, this film was Freddy Krueger's highest kill count of any Nightmare on Elm Street film. This is the only Nightmare on Elm Street film with a male main protagonist, at least for the entirety of the film. Freddy Krueger only appears in 13 minutes of the film, also making him almost as much time, if not a little less time, than the previous one. Whenever Freddy is on screen, Whale's song was added to the background music, adding to the eerie, dreamlike feeling to the film. Due to Mark Patterson's mannerisms, this movie has been considered one of the more homoerotic horror movies. Mark Patton is openly gay in real life, causing his acting and appearance in the film for people to consider this. This movie also makes no mention of the Elm Street vendetta. So, my own personal opinions on Elm Street 2. I think it's an interesting film, very well acted, very well written. However, I think they failed in trying to keep things straight. They missed out on making sure that the reasons Freddy is here are kind of really vague and very unusual. Also, the fact that Freddy's kind of ignoring his rules from the first film where he can only be in dreams, literally forcing himself, at least temporarily at one point in the film, to actually be in the real world and attacking people who are wide awake and destroying property and locking doors to prevent adults from being able to protect the kids who he's after. However, it's due to the fact that the character he's taking over is deeply in love with another female lead in this movie, is the main reason why he decides to give up his attempt to make a massacre out of a party and flees back to his boiler room. So overall, I think it's an interesting movie, slightly flawed, but still a decently solid movie overall. So with that being said, we move on to Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, possibly my favorite of the franchise. It was released on February 27, 1987, so they actually skipped a year. And it was given the budget of $5 million, the highest budget yet to any of the Freddy movies. The budgets just keep going up. But it was also managed to gain them $44,700,000, almost reaching $800,000. Some quick facts. Freddy's famous line, "Welcome to Prime Time, bitch," was actually improvised originally. When Freddy was to kill Jennifer, he was only going to say, "This is it, Jennifer, your big break on TV." But Robert Englund came up with the last part, and it managed to stick so well that they actually added it in on the film itself. And that's pretty much the only bit of trivia they have for this. I will add some extra trivia. This film was originally written by Wes Craven. It was his only major return back to the franchise until much later on. He was not exactly thrilled with how they interpreted his script, but I will say that it was cued down enough that they were actually able to supply the film with even bigger and grander special effects and even better sets than ever had been previously used. Also, the budget was obviously thrown to a little bit of the music because the music seems to be highly improved on this one. The actors are all fantastic, and they all seem to be very cued in and very aware of what's going on in this particular film, giving enough room to actually spread themselves out as characters and not just tropes, and make themselves generally likable, which also leads to the fact that it's so disappointing that so many of them fall victim to Freddy. But then again, that's a sign of a good horror movie, is it not? Overall, I think it's it's also very unusual for a film franchise to decide to kill off a main character. Nancy is finally actually killed in this movie. She actually comes back as a main character in her own right, helping the kids to try and deal with Freddy, as she has gotten used to Freddy to the point that she can no longer have dreams of him anymore, unless she is pulled into it due to one of the special abilities of one of the teenagers in this film. That being said, we also have a more religious attempt at trying to stop Freddy, and while it does manage to put him down for quite a while, it does not mean there aren't going to be more sequels. So onwards to the next one, Part 4, The Dream Master. Released on August 19th of 1988, so only 1 year again. This one was given an even bigger budget of $13 million, but it only happened to get only a couple extra million in returns, with only $49 million back after its run in the theaters. Special trivia: This was the highest grossing slasher of the 1980s. Patricia Arquette, who played the original character Kristen in Part 3, was not able to reprise her role in Part 4 because she was actually pregnant at the time, which I will get into that in a little bit. The writer, Scott Pierce, is only a pen name. No such author exists. This film had the most merchandise at the time, and until Freddy vs. Jason, this was the highest box office for Freddy at the time. So, my feelings on Part 4. Very well written script. Very good characters once again. Even better music than we'll actually see for probably most of the franchise. But it is then bogged down in the first half of the movie because Patricia Arquette is not here. She effortlessly played her character in Part 3, and she would have been great for Part 4, but for some reason we pick up this new actress who just doesn't seem to gel well as this character. Also, I'd add that one of the other things that makes me kind of wince at this movie is some of the atrocious fashions on this one. Normally clothing doesn't make me wince so hard, but when you have these really dumpy looking pants and really non-80s dresses that go all the way down to the ankle, it feels like we're going back into the 1950s for some reason. It really doesn't work. It really makes the art design of it feel off, and the costuming feel way off. However, I will say that the rest of the costuming is actually pretty good, and the last outfit that the main character actually wears is inspired by all of the other characters in the movie, and is actually a very nice, fitting, fighting-esque costume for taking on a strange, nightmarish creature like Freddy. So, very much more of a mixed bag than even number 2. Number 2 ranks higher than this one for me because there's so many issues in the first half of it. But the rest of it definitely makes up for it, and it's still a decent watch. So, onward, then, to Part 5. A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, released on August 11th of 1989, so literally 1 year later. They chopped the budget in half to back down to $6 million, and made $22 million off of it. And I can kind of tell why. Some little highlight features of this particular movie. Funny thing that is, there's actually no more things, special little mentions on this movie in the Wikia. And matter of fact, this is also the last film they have in the entire Wikia right now for some reason. Despite the fact that there's several more, and this is the internet, why isn't there more information? I don't know. Anyways, I guess I'll just have to go by the numbers and my own personal feelings for the rest of this video. So, Dream Child. The concept of it is a very good idea, finding a new way to continue on, bringing back Freddy, mostly through the child of the Dream Master, who is the main character from the last movie. She's a girl that is able to take on the abilities and personality traits of those that died on the hands of Freddy, but it only allows her to strengthen herself for the continuing fight against him. However, he is using the yet unborn child, her that is inside of her, to try and feed souls of her new friends in order to try and take her out. This is a really bizarre idea and kind of squeamish in some spots. Especially since the child is technically fed the souls of not only his mother's friends, but also his own father, which is just kind of weird. Somehow she manages to convince the child that Freddy is not a good guy, and that he is actually planning to not only kill her, but also to actually kill him and take over his body when he's given enough souls. In the end, they manage to defeat Freddy once more, using more strange backwards logic. The last one was really weird. They killed him with his own reflection. Can't make that kind of shit up. Anyway, outside of that, the characters are decently written, but the deaths are a little bit odd in this one. I think they went a little too over the top. There's a point where doing enough effects makes the kill, but going overboard on those effects will actually destroy the kill. In this case, I think they went a little too over the top to the point where it's almost comedic. and that kind of ruins the sinisterness of Freddy himself and kind of destroys the impact of anyone actually dying. Number 6. Freddys Dead, The Final Nightmare. This was actually a retroactive plan to get Wes Craven back in to do another film, but Wes Craven didn't want to continue with the strange continuity that had been going on since he left the franchise in 3. So what they decided to do is they added in Freddy Krueger having a child of his own, hence the reason why he started abusing other children after she was taken away from him. We also added in another male character who very much resembles the main character from Part 2, but he has amnesia, at least after we get to know him a bit more in this film. If it is in fact supposed to be the same character, even New Line Cinema won't admit to it. And while the effects and the acting are still pretty decent, the characters are falling a little bit more flat and a little more generic, and also the over-the-top effects for deaths are still well in place and do take away a little bit again from taking these deaths seriously. So with that, Final Nightmare is probably the weakest movie up to this point. And then we get our next movie, technically number 7, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. So let me tell you of an interesting one. And oh, actually, I forgot to mention the budgets. So Dreamchild got $6 million, Final Nightmare got $5 million, and got $34 million back, so it actually did better than Part 5. I can kind of see that a little bit. It was a little more creative, but it was still had some issues. Also, Freddys Dead was not helped by the fact that New Line wanted to force 3D into the final act of the movie, and the 3D never worked. It still does not work. And the poor director, who this was actually her first attempt at directing the movie, was forced into it anyways, despite the fact that it nearly drove her insane. I would add that this director now actually directs some of the season finales of Doctor Who, and she's doing a splendid job, so congrats to her. New Nightmare was given a little more budget this time. We were up to $8 million, but only managed to get $18 million out of the box office, probably the lowest grossing film out of the franchise, despite the fact that Wes Craven was the one that made it. This was released on October 14th on 1994, and features a newly upgraded graphical effect for the makeup, making it look more like an actual burn victim. They also recreate a number of the kills from the original movies, giving them the chance to do more with the actual kills like what they wanted to do originally but didn't have the money to actually do in the original film. But also, it's a very strange beast because it's technically the real world meshing with the fantasy movie world of Nightmare on Elm Street, in that we have a lot of the main characters back from the first movie actually playing themselves in real life, and including some bits and pieces from what happened to them, like the fame of being Freddy Krueger, the stalker that went after Nancy's actress for a number of years before he was finally stopped, and before creepy people like that were being taken seriously after a number of deaths in Hollywood from it. But also in the end, a real, supposedly, Freddy Krueger is trying to get the actors and actresses all back to do another movie, else he'll come into the real world and actually kill people. It's an interesting little plot, and I quite enjoy it. It's a very interesting and very nicely done movie. I'm kind of sad that it didn't catch on, at least not at the time. But, oh well, it happens now and again. I still really enjoy Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and I would highly suggest it to anyone who's seen the first film. After that, Freddy went on hiatus for a number of years, as a matter of fact 9 years, until his next movie, which was Freddy vs. Jason. This was the movie that I skipped up on Friday the 13th, because we need both of them here for this. So, August 15th, 2003, the year I actually graduated from high school, I might add. So the August after that happened. The budget for Freddy vs. Jason was $25 million. It managed to bring in $82 million. And that was in the US alone, garnering a worldwide of $114 million for this film. Freddy vs. Jason is an interesting little beast of a film. The characters were alright, the script is actually very well done. They apparently had to hammer the script for several years before they finally got to a script that they actually liked and would actually run with. Initially, the idea of having these two face off was actually a very good idea, but as a number of the people behind it could tell you that when they read the scripts, it wasn't quite so hot. A lot of them were really janky and didn't quite work. But it was a final attempt and a big push to make a script that actually finally garnered the Freddy vs. Jason script that we all know and love. The Robert Englund couldn't be any better as Freddy. He totally steals the show in every frame that he's in this movie. And the Jason couldn't look any more iconic than he does in this movie as well. Both of them at their top game. And neither one of them won. Deal with it. So, with that being said, a highlight of the franchise, where do you go from there? Well, in the 2000s, you go on to be remade again. A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010 is probably the least asked for remake. We wanted more sequels. Robert Englund is now even to this day saying he's willing to do more more Elm Street movies, but instead we got some other guy with some slightly more realistic burn makeup, but also used a lot of blue screen and cheeks and stuff to try and After Effects it later to make it look like his cheeks were completely burnt out and missing, so you could see his teeth underneath and stuff like that. My problem with Nightmare on Elm Street remake is not even the story. It's one thing to go with the dim, grim, dark, and super serious ideas behind Elm Street. It is, however, a totally another different beast when you take that and then you add hold of this hokey-pokey, bullshit, rubbery-looking CGI. The CGI did not work at all in the favor of this movie, and it's probably the one thing that actually ruins it for me. I really want to like this movie, but every time I watch that CG, it just turns me again. I love the acting. I love the story. I love the actual on-screen real stuff that happens, but the CG was just so dog shit that it ruins the entire experience. If they're ever going to do any more Nightmare on Elm Street movies, I pray to God they use less CG, use CG sparingly, very sparingly, and there's some good examples of how to do this right. Matter of fact, I think I'll talk about them next week. So, for now, enjoy the franchise reviews of the 3 biggest slasher film franchises out there. But also be prepared, because we got one more review for Halloween this year coming next week. I'll see you all then.